Now, flying has long become routine for many people, but even frequent flyers sometimes don't know about things you should never do on a plane. Ooh. No bare feet on a plane. It's one of the biggest no-nos of air travel. Even if we omit the topic of unpleasant odors. Phew. The airplane floor is extremely filthy. People with contagious foot problems might have been walking the aisles barefoot before you. There's likely to be a lot of dirt left after previous passengers. And don't even get me started on the floor in the lavatories. Ew. If your feet need some freedom, take off your shoes, but at least wear your socks, or bring along a pair of light slippers. Keep in mind that the pressurized air in the passenger cabin is just as dry as it is in the Sahara Desert, with only about 20% humidity. That's why your skin may feel discomfort after a flight. But wouldn't it make more sense to install several humidifiers that could add some moisture? But this extra load would cost airlines lots of money. Plus, the plane's airframe is mostly made of aluminum and other metals, and humid air could lead to corrosion. So, don't forget to bring a moisturizer and use it during the flight. Always secure your tray table as soon as the plane starts moving on the tarmac, and never lower it during the takeoff and landing. It's a security measure, which ensures that you and the other passengers will have a clear pathway in case of an emergency evacuation. Also, keep your seat in an upright position during takeoff and landing. First of all, a reclined seat can seriously slow down an emergency evacuation, since it will block a person sitting behind. What's more, the more backward you're leaning, the harder it is to get into the brace position during an emergency landing. Now try to avoid snoozing during or right after takeoff and landing. For one thing, it's not the best thing for your health. The main problem is that the air pressure inside the cabin changes very quickly during these phases of the flight. This, in turn, affects the air pressure in your ears. It's important to be alert during this time to relax and open up your ears, for example by yawning or swallowing frequency. Chewing gum works for me. If you're sleeping, you can't do this, which can lead to permanent damage. And of course, there's a safety issue. Most accidents happen during takeoff and landing. If you're sleeping during these stages, you might not be alert and conscious enough if an emergency happens. Now, this next recommendation comes from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. According to them, you might want to skip on hot drinks on a plane. The water used to make tea or coffee doesn't come from bottles, it's regular tap water. And water tanks on airplanes are often old and full of bacteria. In 2004, there was a study which found that more than 12% of water samples contained harmful bacteria. But if you still decide to have a cup of hot beverage on a plane, never pour coffee or tea on your own. Flight attendants are trained to handle this task in crowded aisles of a moving airplane and won't accidentally burn you or other passengers. Now, it's probably better if you don't order Coke on a plane. The cabin pressure, so low up in the air, causes a lot of foam. For apparent reasons, flight attendants don't want to serve you a cup filled with froth. That's why they'll fill only half the cup, then wait for the bubbles to settle, and then finish pouring. That can take ages. Keep your air vent open. This way you'll minimize the spread of germs. Planes have high-quality air filters. They'll catch up to 99% of all airborne germs, so you should be safe there. But make sure to wipe that tray table. With 8 times more bacteria than the toilet flush button, it's the dirtiest place on board. Another thing you should avoid is leaning your head on the window if you have a window seat. You never know who occupied your seat before you, and, in any case, the glass is likely to be covered with germs. Say no to backless sandals and high heels on a flight. I do. There are very serious safety reasons for such a request. The first is that both these types of footwear make it very difficult to evacuate the aircraft fast. If you wear high heels, you will anyway have to leave them behind in case the crew is using emergency slides during an evacuation. The heels are very likely to damage the slide, so off they go. Now ask yourself, do you really fancy running away from the airplane barefoot? I'll answer that for you. Nope. Instead, wear sturdy shoes with a solid sole. In this case, you won't find yourself standing on the hot tarmac or in the weeds without any footwear at all. Don't stuff heavy objects into overhead compartments. Your things may not stay inside during severe turbulence. And while falling out, they will injure you and other passengers. Ow! That's why, if it feels difficult to lift something into the overhead compartment, better put it under the seat in front of you or elsewhere. Now, don't blame the pilots for the hard landing. When you experience it in bad weather, it might be intentional. If the runway is covered with water or snow, the plane has to touch down hard in order to break the water layer and prevent aquaplaning. Otherwise, the water can perform the role of a lubricant, and the plane won't be able to brake or respond to any control. Deploying an emergency slide when there's no emergency is a very bad idea. It can cause hour-long delays and cost airlines thousands of dollars to pack the undamaged slide back into its container. Why would someone do it? Apparently, some think it'll help them get off the plane faster. Well, they're an idiot. Don't be one yourself. Just keep in mind that it doesn't work this way. Don't ignore the instructions of the cabin crew to open window shades during takeoff and landing. This way, flight attendants can see what's happening outside, assess the situation, and act fast, organizing the evacuation. For example, if there's a fire outside one exit, they will redirect passengers toward another door. Avoid carrying spray deodorants or shaving cream in your carry-on baggage. Both these things tend to explode mid-flight and therefore aren't allowed on board the airplane. A much better idea is to choose stick deodorants. You also mustn't keep power banks in your checked luggage, and if you want to bring one on board, its capacity shouldn't be more than 20,000 milliamps. Besides, you shouldn't use them during the flight since they might catch fire. In general, lithium batteries are safe to use, but since they're high energy, they can catch fire if they're not treated with care, misused, or if there's a manufacturing fault. Such batteries have been the cause of quite a few fires on board airplanes, as well as during ground handling. Do not worry about airport scanners, they won't harm your health. Otherwise, airport employees wouldn't be able to stay near them without special clothing. Even when you're passing by a baggage scanner, the risk is minimal. And the last one, don't act like a jerk on board. Behave yourself. I know you will. Also, never try to land a plane on your own. Nah, don't laugh, I'm not kidding. In movies, they often show us that something happens to the pilots and they can't land the plane. And that's when the main character, a very skillful person, starts their game. Unfortunately, it's close to impossible to do it in real life. Even if a person is a genius, is fond of computer simulators that match the real model of an aircraft 100%, and is ready to follow all the instructions from the ground, they're likely to fail due to one simple aspect: stress. It is true that there have been cases throughout history when amateurs landed smallish private planes after the incapacitation of a pilot. However, there has never been a case of a non-professional pilot landing a commercial passenger airplane. It's only in the movies.
Let's face it, airports can be pretty annoying. But the most annoying thing about them is probably having to take the laptop out of your backpack and put it in a separate bin while going through the security check. But, of course, they wouldn't make us do those extra moves if there wasn't a good reason for it. Laptops are dense, and X-rays can't penetrate them, so it's easy to hide something dangerous there. If the device is out and on its own in a separate bin, it's easier for the scanners to capture something dangerous. Most airplanes are white. Is there a benefit to choosing this exact color? No, white paint doesn't make a place feel lighter. Neither does it save money on painting. Here are the actual reasons for the choice: safety, efficiency, and comfort. The first airplanes had a metallic color, but the problem with metal is that it's prone to corrosion, so painting it is a great way to protect an airplane from corrosion. White is favored for several reasons. First, planes fly high above the clouds and are exposed to sunlight a lot. White is the color that absorbs the least heat, and white planes get heated less. Also, sunlight makes the paint fade away. A colorful airplane will have its paint fade very fast and will require repainting. And repainting is costly, so painting aircraft white is a more lasting choice. Also, any damage is more easily noticed on a white surface. So that's one more point for the white color. We always board from the left side of the plane, every single time, no exceptions. For some reason, the right side just doesn't seem to be an option. Yes, that's done on purpose. First, the captain usually sits on the left. This way, it's easier for the pilot to align the plane with the terminal jet bridge. Also, aircraft are fueled and loaded with baggage on the right side. Since people board the plane from the left, the crew can do their job undisturbed, and there's no danger to passengers. Consistency with the choice of a side helps to make everything work more effectively. Since everyone always enters from the left, all jet bridges are designed to get attached to the left side of the airplane. If every airplane had the freedom to choose the side, it would create an additional mess for the logistics behind the process. There are more questions popping up, like what does this black triangle drawn above one of the windows mean? Apparently, it marks the seat from which the view of the airplane's wing is the best. It's needed for the crew to find the spot as fast as possible if, in case of an emergency, they need to inspect the engines, slats, or flaps. This mark saves a lot of time. Next, the rows aren't well aligned with the windows. This is business. Originally, all planes are designed with rows and windows lining up perfectly. But when an airline buys a jet, they add some additional seats, squeezing them closer together. This way, they have more seats, which means more passengers, so they can sell more tickets. But you get less space for your legs and might miss out on a window. Also, all windows have rounded corners, and this is done for safety reasons. There used to be planes with squared windows, but those caused crashes because such windows couldn't withstand high-altitude pressures. At high altitudes, external atmospheric pressure is lower than the pressure inside the cabin. So, there's a big difference in pressure inside and outside the airplane, and this creates stress. Without windows, this stress flows smoothly through the material. A squared window becomes an obstacle, and the flow of stress needs to change direction. The pressure builds up in the corners, leading to cracks. As a result, such windows break. Oval windows allow the stress to flow more smoothly without disrupting them too much and preventing stress concentration. So, oval windows are safer. The glass used in production is stretched acrylic glass, and there are 3 separate panes of it. This is done as a security measure in case there is a breach. This way, at least one pane will remain intact at all times. Have you ever noticed those small holes in the windows? The tiny hole is actually only in the pane that's in the middle. Its task is to regulate the huge pressure difference inside and outside the cabin. This way, the outer pane can handle the load. If the outer pane breaks, the middle one, even though there's a hole in it, will be able to keep the window intact. Also, that hole prevents the windows from fogging up. Now, let's say you want to relax and watch a movie. Luckily, there's a pair of headphones. But they're weird. They have a 2-pronged plug. No, this is not some kind of advanced technology. This is a witty move to prevent theft. If you can't use them anywhere else but on the airplane, no one will have the urge to snatch them away. Outside the airplane, they're basically useless. And then they bring food. There are people who love airplane food and people who aren't very fond of it. But most will agree that food does taste different in the air. Turns out, it's actually a thing. Low air pressure, lack of humidity, and background noise that we have at high altitudes change the functioning of our taste buds. They become less sensitive to sweet and salty foods, so airlines have to use more seasoning. Have you ever wondered what would happen if someone opened an airplane door accidentally? This wouldn't end well. It would be very dangerous to say the least. More specifically, soon there would be a lack of oxygen in the cabin. But gladly, no one can open that door accidentally. The pressure difference between inside and outside makes it almost impossible. It would take some immense strength to open it. The doors are designed to open on their own in case of an emergency. Speaking of safety, during takeoff and landing, the crew dims the light in the cabin. This is done for a good reason. This way, in case of emergency, you will see everything more clearly. Your eyes will get used to the darkness, and you'll have an easier time evacuating. Now, about pilots. They always wear those cool sunglasses, but the purpose is not to look cooler. They're used to protect the eyes. Throughout their career, pilots have to take care of their vision. But the problem is that it's not an easy task when you're a pilot. The damaging solar radiation that our sun emits is filtered out by the Earth's atmosphere, so the sunlight isn't very damaging to you if you spend most of your time on the ground. But it's different up in the sky. There's less air there, and the brightness is way higher. And with every 1,000 feet of elevation, the solar radiation is around 5% stronger. On average, aircraft fly at an altitude of 35,000 feet. This means that the amount of UV radiation is 175% greater than on the ground. This is very damaging to any person's vision. The large amount of time pilots spend in the air makes them vulnerable to different eye problems. And having eye problems can cost a pilot their career. So, wearing sunglasses is a crucial thing for them, and these sunglasses must be of the best quality. They should minimize the impact of sunlight and withstand UV rays, providing 100% protection for the eyes. Also, they can't be polarized, since polarization can mess with the perception of the cockpit displays. They should provide the best clarity, decrease eye fatigue, and minimize color deformation, so that pilots can see just like they would without their sunglasses on.
Now, flight attendants are trained to notice some pretty important things about each passenger once they board the plane. Curious about what these are? Well, first and foremost, flight attendants are all about safety. So if you're following the rules and paying attention during the safety demo, you're already off to a great start in their book. But don't worry, they're not just looking for rule followers. They also want to make sure you're comfortable and have everything you need to enjoy your flight. One thing they notice right away is how much luggage you're carrying. If you're struggling to lift a heavy bag into the overhead bin, they'll probably step in and help you out. And if you're one of those people who insists on bringing a massive carry-on that barely fits in the bin, they might discreetly check to make sure you're not breaking any weight or size limits. Speaking of luggage, flight attendants can tell a lot about you from your suitcase. If it's covered in stickers from exotic locations, they might assume you're a seasoned traveler who knows their way around an airport. But if it's a beat-up old bag with duct tape holding it together, they might wonder if you're a first-time flyer or just someone who doesn't care much about appearances. Of course, one of the most important things flight attendants notice about you is how you treat them and your fellow passengers. If you're friendly, polite, and respectful, they'll go out of their way to make your flight as pleasant as possible. But if you're rude, demanding, and throw a tantrum when things don't go your way, they might not be as eager to help you out. And then some. They'll always take a sneak peek at what's on your feet, too. It's not because they're all secretly obsessed with shoes, it's actually for your safety. They check out your sneakers to see if you can quickly and easily run in case of an emergency. If you're planning to board a flight, you might want to think twice before rocking those high heels, unless you want to hear an emergency command to kick them off. Speaking of emergencies, flight attendants also like to look at whether you're a fit person or not. They do this just in case they need some physical assistance in the event of some bad, unwanted thing happening. And hey, if you happen to be a doctor, don't be shy about letting the crew know. You might just be a lifesaver. Now, let's talk about food and drinks, my favorite topic. Flight attendants are always happy to serve you, but they also notice what you order. If you ask for something that's not on the menu or request a complicated custom drink, they might raise an eyebrow. But if you order something simple and easy to prepare, like a glass of water or a bag of pretzels, they'll be more than happy to oblige. If you're planning to fly with your furry friend, make sure to prepare it for some attention from the flight attendants. Don't worry, they're just curious about your cute companion. And if your pet is a trained service animal and registered with the airline beforehand, they're good to go. Also, if you've paid for your pet to fly, make sure they stay cozy in their carrier for the entire trip. Flight attendants are also trained to notice any unusual behavior or potential red flags. If someone seems nervous or anxious, they'll keep an eye on them to make sure they're okay. Luckily, some flight attendants are also happy to share some secrets that will make your next experience in an airplane way better. For instance, if you're wondering when's the best time to take to the skies, they may have some ideas. Some destinations, for example, have plenty of flights throughout the day. So the question is, should you go early or stay up late? Turns out that the best time is first thing in the morning. But shh, don't tell anyone, or they might steal all the morning flights. The reasoning is pretty sound, though. The weather is usually calmer in the morning, and any delays from the day before should have been sorted out overnight. Now, when it comes to holiday travel, here's another piece of advice. If you can swing it, give yourself a little wiggle room. For example, try flying on the day before the winter holiday starts, instead of the 24th itself. That way, you'll have a bit more flexibility and hopefully avoid any stress or last-minute airport drama. What can you do when it comes to delays, you might wonder? Well, they can happen at any time, unfortunately, and there's not much a flight attendant can do about it. But don't worry, flight attendants and passengers are on the same team. Also, don't believe the rumors. Flight attendants won't hide information from you. There's no point. If you're stuck on a delayed flight, don't hesitate to ask the staff for all the info you need, and rest assured they will do their best to get you on the next available flight as soon as possible. Now, what about jet lag? Surely flight attendants have the best remedies. If you're hopping across time zones, most flight attendants recommend catching a quick snooze upon arrival. But don't get too cozy. Stay up until nightfall to help your body clock adjust. After all, you don't want to be groggy when you arrive. Also, if you're only visiting a destination for a short time, airplane staff recommend sticking to your home time zone. It might just save you from the hustle of adjusting to another time zone unnecessarily. And don't forget to keep hydrated, munch on nutritious food, and get in some exercise to keep your body feeling tip-top. Now, we've all seen in movies those scenes where the main character gets a surprise upgrade to business class out of the blue. As much as we all dream of being upgraded to a luxurious seat mid-flight, it's usually only possible on the ground, unless you're one lucky duck. There's a list and a method for who gets bumped up to first class. Sometimes, flight attendants will shuffle passengers around so families can sit together, or they do it to fix any seat mix-up. But once the plane takes off, moving around is pretty rare. Ever wondered if you can switch seats with another passenger during the flight? The answer is yes, you can. Most flight attendants encourage it, especially if it means keeping families together. However, it's best to figure out any seat-swapping arrangements before boarding to avoid any chaos. Plus, some seats are fancier than others, and if people have paid extra for them, it's important to be respectful of that. Also, did you know that the emergency exit rows are sometimes marketed as premium seating? Let's talk about some serious airplane etiquette. So, who gets to claim the middle armrest? It's a big debate, but most flight attendants think the person in the middle seat deserves it. Hey, let's give them a break. They're already stuck in the least desirable spot. Now, on to the great window blind debate. Some people want them up. Some people want them down. If it's a nighttime flight, keep them closed. You don't want to disturb your fellow passengers with unnecessary light. However, if you're flying over the Himalayas, you better believe people are going to peek through those windows. And let's not forget, blinds need to be open upon arrival for safety reasons. The crew needs to see outside in case of emergencies. Have you ever been curious about what flight attendants eat on board? Do they have the same food as the passengers? Turns out, they can have the same meals if they want to, but they don't always choose to. Some prefer to pack their own snacks, like hummus, apples, and popcorn, because the airplane options don't always keep them alert. They also focus on drinking lots of water and avoiding foods that might make them feel bloated, but they do indulge in airplane coffee. Some crew members even bring their own meals on board due to dietary requirements, or to add to the festive vibe on holiday flights. I once saw a passenger give a tin of holiday cookies to the flight attendants. You can bet she got some extra special attention.
One Asian airline company has recently moved bathrooms and kitchens on a few of its new A330 Neos. The main purpose of such a restructuring is to cram in a record 460 seats. That's 20 more than before. There's a new tendency, in Asia in particular, to stuff more passengers into the aircraft that fly the most popular routes. Of course, customers are less than happy with this development, but it does help the aviation industry. For example, in Asia, more than 100 million people fly for the first time every year. And the cramming in strategy is helping low-cost carriers serve those travelers who care more about price than comfort. But the most popular tactic to fit more people in a jet is bolting in more chairs. For example, one European low-cost carrier ordered several modified aircraft from Boeing Company in 2014. They all had 8 more seats than normal. In 2017, another airline carrier started adding an extra seat into each economy row of its Boeing 777-300s. It cost each passenger an inch of personal space. These days, less legroom is the new normal. In the early 2000s, rows in economy class were 34 to 35 inches apart. Now, a distance of 30 to 31 inches is a regular occurrence. As for short flights, rows can be a mere 28 inches apart. Well, to get the maximum number of people on board, airlines have to sacrifice something. And in this case, it's your comfort. But at least you can improve the situation by spending some money and upgrading for more legroom. You wouldn't have been able to buy additional comfort during the flight if you had traveled by plane in the 1920s. Aircraft of that time shook a lot and were loud, cold, and unpressurized. Air travel was often slower than traveling by train. Plus, it was only possible during the day. Planes could hold no more than 20 passengers and reached a cruising altitude of 3,000 feet. For comparison, these days, airplanes usually cruise at an altitude of more than 30,000 feet. The average speed of an airplane at that time was around 100 miles per hour, and they had to make frequent stops to refuel. Flight attendants appeared only in the 1930s. That's when traveling by plane got a bit more comfortable. The service was better than in the previous decade. Plus, airplanes had been developed and improved. They became soundproofed and heated. The seats got upholstered. They could now fly way higher at around 13,000 feet. It reduced turbulence and allowed planes to move twice as fast. The first pressurized commercial airplane appeared in 1938. The 1950s are often called the golden age of air travel. Flying at that time wasn't cheap. A round trip from Chicago to Phoenix could easily cost today's equivalent of $1,168. For a one-way flight to Europe, you would have to pay more than $3,000 in today's dollars. At the same time, it was a lavish experience. Passengers showed up for their flights dressed up and could enjoy in-flight meals that included prime rib and lobster. With time, flying became more and more common. In the 60s, passengers stopped dressing up as much as before. People could fly without any form of ID. They could just arrive at the airport half an hour before the departure and go straight to the gate, often together with their loved ones who came to see them off. Security screening became mandatory only in the early 1970s because bigger flights also meant more passengers. The jumbo jet, aka the Boeing 747, made air travel more affordable for millions of travelers. Airlines could now transport large numbers of passengers, and they started selling tickets at more reasonable prices. At that time, there was still plenty of legroom, and flight attendants had enough time to cater to every passenger's needs. From 1970 to 1974, American Airlines even featured a piano lounge in the rear of its 747. In the 1980s, you could check as many bags as you wanted. Meals were always included, and you could visit the cockpit during the flight. There, children were given a wing pin to remember the experience. In the 1990s, people saw in-flight entertainment for the first time. And 20 years later, in the 2010s, passengers started to expect the same conveniences they were used to having on the ground. For example, they wanted private touchscreen TVs and USB chargers in every seat, and on many flights, they got it. But at the same time, some airlines began to introduce extra fees for literally everything, from carry-ons to seat assignments. Free meals also turned into a rarity. There's also a tendency nowadays for airplane seats to become less and less comfortable. And there's a reason for that. Surprise, surprise, it has to do with airlines trying to make more money. Plane seats themselves are designed in a certain way, which often makes it unpleasant to sit on them for long periods of time. The main issue is that the seats need to be light. It can help avoid high fuel consumption. Airlines design seats to weigh as little as possible to fly planes more cheaply. And how can you make a plane seat lighter? Right, by using less padding. Together with the decreasing legroom and seat width, it makes flying long distances quite uncomfortable. Plus, plane seats are made to be both lightweight and strong and fire retardant. So they usually have an aluminum frame and some kind of urethane foam attached to it. Some seats even have Kevlar in them. All this is covered with leather, which is used to make seats look nicer. It also allows flight attendants to clean up spills easily. When choosing a seat on a plane, you should keep in mind a number of important moments. If you often get motion sickness, pick a seat over the wing. This way you'll feel less turbulence. If you have a short connecting time, opt for a seat in the front. If you're traveling with somebody, pick a window and an aisle seat in the back of the plane. Unless the flight is sold out, the chance is high that the middle seat between you will remain unoccupied. If you're planning to sleep during your flight, go with a window seat. If you feel you might need easy access to the bathroom during the flight, pick an aisle seat towards the back of the aircraft. And if you need to have a small bag with you during the flight, avoid picking a bulkhead seat. They usually don't have anywhere to store your carry-on other than the overhead bins. Oh, and speaking of your luggage, while packing your bag, try to use all the space available to you. It's a great idea to put small items like socks or a swimsuit inside your shoes. Pack your scarf and belt into your handbag. If you're going to travel with a backpack, put the heaviest items at the bottom. Also, try to roll everything. This way, your clothes will take up less space and will wrinkle less. When going on a trip, leave your large wallet at home. Instead, put all your essentials like your passport or cash into a small container or even a toiletries bag. You can also use a mint tin to keep your credit cards and money. Put everything inside, then cover it with a piece of paper and fill the tin with mints. Now, you've got the perfect hiding spot. Take a picture of everything that you've packed in your bag before you go to the airport. This way, if your luggage is lost, you'll be able to make a claim with the airline or your insurance company by showing them the items that have been lost. It's bound to increase your chances of receiving compensation for your stuff. You may also consider printing out a copy of your boarding pass and putting it inside your suitcase. This way, if your suitcase gets lost, it will be easier for the airport workers to identify it.
Now, here's something scary. You're hanging in the air at an altitude of 30,000 feet. Frightening? Okay, let me make it better. The altitude is the same, but you're inside a large metal tube of an aircraft. Your flight is a really long one, and now, 6 cups of water later, you feel the urge to visit the bathroom. But the line is so long. Suddenly, a rather geeky thought bubbles up in your mind. Each of these people is going to flush the toilet after using it. But how can a plane carry so much water? And where does all that waste go? Surely it doesn't get dumped mid-flight upon pre-selected cities along the way, splattering all over the ground and… Okay, that's enough. One pilot has revealed the secret. All the waste goes through special plumbing to the rear of the plane. There, it's stored in sealed compartments. When the plane arrives at its destination, the ground crew removes all that waste. On a long-haul flight, toilets can be flushed more than 1,000 times, which creates up to 320 gallons of waste. Now, about that water. Have you ever seen a toilet bowl filled with water on a plane? No. That's because on a plane, you use a vacuum toilet. It's not your regular home toilet bowl filled with water. When you flush this good old toilet, a siphon drains the bowl and gravity then carries the water further into the sewer system. But this approach won't work on an aircraft because it's moving. The water would splash out through the whole flight, especially when the plane is flying through a region of turbulence. But if there's no water, you can't use gravity or siphon to empty the toilet bowl. Instead, when you flush, a valve opens in the sewer line, and the vacuum pulls the waste out of the bowl into a special tank. And since the vacuum does all the work, there's almost no need for water, or rather bright blue sanitizing liquid they use in planes. That's why such a system needs just half a gallon of fluid or even less for one flush. In comparison, a water-saving toilet uses 1.6 gallons, and a regular toilet needs 5 gallons of liquid. Okay, we figured out how planes deal with all that waste accumulating during the flight. But let's imagine another situation, a cracked cockpit windshield. The thing is, such a windshield consists of 2 panes of thick glass with a plastic layer for heating in between. Either of these panes can hold the full pressure if something happens to the other. So even if a windshield cracks, the airplane remains safe. This happens very infrequently, but when it does, pilots usually descend to reduce the pressure on the windshield and, if necessary, change their itinerary. Okay, now let's speak about what we can do if there's a dangerous snake in the cockpit. Now, you might say I'm making this up, or I saw it in that Samuel L. Jackson movie, but it was a real situation. A South African pilot had flown a small plane with 4 passengers to an altitude of 11,000 feet when he noticed something that was, shall we say, by no means supposed to be inside, a cobra slithering under his seat. For a second, he was just staring at the reptile. Then, not wanting to cause panic, the pilot very calmly told his companions about the unticketed stowaway. The plane had to make an emergency landing. In this case, the pilot decided to be honest with his passengers. But sometimes, pilots choose to replace the words that make certain people nervous, like turbulence, with other, much more innocent expressions. And if you want to be in the know, pay attention to the following signs. If a pilot tells the cabin crew to sit down, a patch of bumpy road is ahead. Another expression you should be on the lookout for is, "We're flying through an air pocket." This air pocket is just another word for the winds jostling your plane from different directions. But here's the thing, the term air pocket causes way less panic than turbulence. And there's also the area of weather. This phrase usually means heavy rain or a thunderstorm not far from a flying plane. So don't be surprised if your captain says, "There's an area of weather ahead, we're going to fly around it." Oh, and since we started on the mysterious language pilots use, here are some more examples. You can overhear a pilot saying, "George is flying the plane." And no, they don't mean their colleague. That's how the plane's autopilot system is called. George is programmed to follow a certain route, taking into consideration the weather conditions, turbulence, and altitude. Pilots normally use the autopilot after reaching cruising altitude or after flying for more than 10 hours. That's when they're expected to rest. Sometimes you may overhear that there's a pilot in the jump seat. It's not a rare occasion when an off-duty pilot or other flight personnel takes a jump seat when flying back to their home base. Federal Aviation Administration inspectors can also travel in fold-up seats. Some airlines may even offer jump seats to pilots working for other companies. Also, if you were wondering, there's no connection between the jump seat and actually jumping out of the plane itself. Now, if your first flight has arrived late and you're in a mad rush to catch your connecting flight, you're called a runner. You might overhear crew members or ground staff saying, "Runners are on the way." It means you're waiting for some transfer passengers. Unfortunately, if a flight has a strict departure time, it may leave without runners. Now, if you hear a pilot saying "pan, pan," it's not a great sign. Trouble is on the way. Pilots use this term in their communication with air traffic controllers. This is the signal which means that something has gone wrong with the flight and the cockpit crew needs immediate attention. When other pilots who are using the same radio frequency hear this signal, they stop all their communication and let the pan-pan pilot get their message through. 359er. Nah, it's not some mega secret code. It's the way pilots pronounce certain numbers in their pilot English. Tree stands for 3, 5 for 5, and niner is used instead of 9. Such pronunciation helps to avoid radio miscommunications and the confusion caused by similar sounding numbers. We're just finishing some paperwork." If you hear the captain saying this phrase, it doesn't mean you're in for a delay. Finishing paperwork usually means revisiting the flight itinerary, checking the plane's weight and balance, or even waiting for the ground staff to prepare the flight's logbook. The final approach means a bit different things for pilots and flight attendants. The cabin crew speaks of the final approach when the plane is nearing the final part of the descent. For pilots, the final approach means that the plane is already aligned with the runway and they don't need to maneuver or make additional turns. If a pilot refers to a ferry flight, F-E-R-R-Y, they speak about a situation when an empty plane with no passengers or cargo on board gets flown from one place to another. For the cabin crew, it's the time when they can relax. Ferry flights may happen when there's a technical problem with an airliner and pilots need to bring it back to its home base. But even if the flight is full, the crew still has an opportunity to rest. Some Boeing jets have a place where crew members can relax during their shift. The door to this safe haven looks like any other covered door. But once you open it, you'll see a narrow staircase leading to a small room with 2 beds separated by curtains. There's also some place for staff to hang their uniforms. By the way, some pilots say they don't like it when people clap when the plane lands. They say they aren't doing anything special since it's just their job. You don't clap for the mail carrier when they deliver your mail, do you? That's a rhetorical question one of them asks. You're also not supposed to tip your pilots, even if you really want to, because it's weird, as some of them admit. The whole tipping aspect is new in the flying industry. And while tipping flight attendants is becoming more common, who would have thought? Giving money to pilots is kind of frowned upon.